The glass doors of the luxury dealership slid open with a soft hiss, and Maye Musk stepped inside. The California sun reflected off the showroom's polished marble floor, casting streaks of light across the gleaming cars arranged like royalty on display. Her entrance barely caused a ripple. She moved with quiet grace, her tailored navy dress falling just below the knee, simple pearl earrings catching the light as she glanced around. A pair of dark sunglasses concealed her eyes, while her understated handbag hung neatly over her arm. On her feet were flat, modest nude pumps, chosen more for comfort than attention. Behind a nearby sales desk, Blake Thompson glanced up from his tablet. His eyes swept across Maye quickly, the way a jeweler might inspect a cubic zirconia hoping it might be a diamond, but quickly realizing it wasn't. She didn't fit the usual profile that crossed his threshold. No designer logos, no private security, no flashy companions. An older woman, alone, and plainly dressed. His initial polite smile twitched briefly, almost slipping into amusement before he forced it back into place. Blake rose smoothly, adjusting his blue silk tie, rehearsing the tone he used for time wasters. He approached her with the calculated warmth reserved for clients who probably couldn't afford to touch the leather, let alone drive one of these machines home. "Good morning. Welcome to Monarch Luxury Motors. Is there something I can assist you with today?" Maye's voice was calm, pleasant. "I was hoping to take a closer look at one of your newer coupes. The midnight blue one over there caught my eye." Blake's smile held steady, but his eyes narrowed, darting briefly to her shoes, her bag, her age. "That," he said softly, "is the Azure Supreme Coupe. A very special model. Limited edition. Only 15 produced globally this year." He paused, waiting for the moment to let the numbers start working. "It begins at $400,000 before customizations." Maye offered a small nod, as if the figure neither surprised nor intimidated her. "It's quite beautiful. I'd love to sit inside if that's possible." Blake tilted his head slightly, his tone now taking on a subtle edge. "Of course. But usually, our serious clients book private appointments to view vehicles at that level. We like to give each buyer a very tailored experience. You see, many visitors come by simply to browse or admire. Naturally, we have a full schedule of dedicated consultations today." Around them, a few other sales associates exchanged knowing glances. A couple browsing nearby paused to observe the exchange, sensing something entertaining unfolding. One of Blake's colleagues let out a quiet snicker before pretending to study the specs of a nearby Bentley. Maye kept her posture composed, her voice even. "I completely understand the demand. Still, I happen to be here now and was hoping we might make an exception." Blake exhaled a shallow breath, as if indulging a child's fantasy. "Well, perhaps I could show you some of our other fine selections that might be more suitable." He gestured with a sweeping arm toward a row of certified pre-owned sedans lined up along the far wall. Reliable models. Still luxurious. And, of course, far more approachable in terms of investment. These might fit your, shall we say, budget more comfortably. The dismissive tone, sharpened with condescension, floated in the air like smoke. A few customers nearby subtly turned their heads, curious but pretending not to watch too closely. Maye felt the heat rise faintly beneath her skin but refused to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Her years of public life, of standing poised before both critics and cameras, had prepared her for moments like these. "I'm actually quite set on the Azure," she repeated softly. "Would it truly be impossible to take a look inside today?" Blake's professional veneer thinned further. He offered a shallow chuckle, loud enough for surrounding ears to catch. "Truly, this isn't a matter of opening doors for entertainment. Our clientele expect privacy, discretion, and, frankly, preparation. A vehicle like that isn't here for window shopping." His words stung, not for their content but for the casual cruelty behind them. The assumption. The judgment. The arrogance. Still, Maye's voice did not waver. "Yes, sur you, monsieur?" "Thompson," he filled in, folding his arms. "Mr. Thompson. I assure you, I have no intention of wasting anyone's time." But Blake was done with the conversation. He offered a shallow nod, his smile now little more than teeth behind a mask. "I'm afraid I must attend to other clients with scheduled appointments. If you'd like, I can provide a brochure for you to review at your leisure. Perhaps, if circumstances change, we can arrange something more appropriate in the future." Without waiting for a reply, he gestured towards one of his junior sales associates. "Daniel, please get this lady some information about our certified pre-owned inventory." Daniel approached reluctantly, clearly uncomfortable, but professional enough to offer a kind smile. May accepted the brochure with a nod, though her gaze never left Blake's smug face. As she turned to leave, the murmurs from behind drifted to her ears. People like that never know when to quit. Just browsing for a fantasy. Stepping back into the sunlight, May pulled out her phone and typed a short message, her fingers steady despite the sting still lingering in her chest. "Schedule a short talk with Elon." The message sent, she lowered her sunglasses slightly, allowing herself the briefest of smiles. This would not be the end of the conversation. Not by a long shot. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime as Maye Musk stepped into the private hallway leading to her penthouse. The late afternoon sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden lines across the polished hardwood. Outside on the balcony, a light breeze stirred the curtains, bringing in the faint hum of Los Angeles far below. As she passed the entryway, her eyes flicked briefly to the Tesla Model S quietly charging in her private garage, its sleek silhouette framed by the sunset. The familiar sight brought a faint comfort, a silent nod to her son's vision that had reshaped the world's highways. May set her purse on the marble countertop and slipped off her shoes with deliberate grace. She moved through the apartment like a dancer who knew every beat, her posture tall, her breath calm. But beneath the practiced serenity, the sting from the dealership still lingered. Not for the insult itself, but for what it represented, for the many who bore it every day without recourse. Her phone buzzed gently. The name on the screen read simply, Elon. She accepted the video call, and his familiar face filled the screen, framed by the minimalist background of his office, somewhere between meetings, always in motion. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice warm but immediately scanning her expression. "I saw your message. What happened?" May offered a light smile, though her eyes betrayed a deeper current. "Oh, just one of life's little reminders. A man at a car dealership today thought I couldn't possibly afford one of his precious vehicles." Elon's eyes narrowed instantly, his tone darkening. "Which dealership? What's the name? I'll handle it." She lifted her hand slightly, a mother's calming gesture that had worked since he was a boy.
"No, darling.
"That's not necessary." "But it is," Elon countered. "They disrespected you. They don't get to do that. Not to anyone, but especially not to you." May's voice remained gentle, but her words carried the firmness of decades spent navigating worlds where judgment came faster than understanding. "If I had made a scene, they would have learned nothing. They would have written me off as just another difficult customer." He frowned, not yet convinced. "Then what do you want to do? Let them get away with it?" She paused, choosing her words with care. "This isn't about revenge, Elon. It's an opportunity. They need to see the consequences of their assumptions, not feel the wrath of a billionaire's fury." Elon exhaled, leaning back slightly, processing her logic. "Sometimes I forget you were teaching long before you were modeling or speaking. Always the educator." May's eyes softened. "The world is full of women like me, but without the advantages I've been fortunate to gain. Women judged by their age, by their appearance, by whether they walk in alone or with someone powerful beside them. And most don't have a son who can make a phone call and fix things." He watched her quietly, the frustration in him slowly giving way to admiration. "You want them to learn something real." "Exactly." May nodded. "Let's give them a lesson they won't forget, but one they'll have to teach themselves." A small smile crept onto Elon's face, the strategist in him awakening. "All right then. We'll do it your way. But when this is over, I expect you'll let me make sure it doesn't happen again." She allowed herself a chuckle, her voice lightening. "Deal." As the call ended, May gazed out over the skyline, the city glowing beneath the evening sky. The insult had not broken her. It had only sharpened her resolve. This was far bigger than one car or one salesman. This was about every unseen person dismissed too quickly, too easily. And tomorrow, the first lesson would begin. The next morning, As the city stretched awake under the soft blush of dawn, a quiet series of phone calls rippled through the thin fabric of Los Angeles' high-end business world. In a quiet office on the 37th floor of a downtown tower, one of Elon Musk's senior assistants reviewed the last details of her task, her voice calm and measured as she spoke into the encrypted line. "Good morning, Monarch Luxury Motors. My client is interested in scheduling a private viewing of several of your high-end models. He prefers discretion and a quiet environment, as always." The man on the other end, Richard Mason, straightened in his chair, his pulse quickening ever so slightly. "Of course," he said, his voice controlled but laced with enthusiasm. "May I ask who the client is?" There was the briefest pause, as if calculated. "Mr. Musk." Richard's hand tightened on the receiver. "Elon Musk." He repeated it softly, almost reverently, as though saying the name aloud might summon the man himself. "That's correct. He is considering a potential expansion of his personal collection. He would prefer to visit tomorrow morning, first thing, before your showroom opens to the public. We would appreciate your full discretion, and naturally, your highest level of service." "Naturally, of course." Richard's voice nearly stumbled over itself in his eagerness. "We would be honored. Everything will be prepared." As the call ended, Richard leaned back in his chair, eyes wide with sudden possibilities. Monarch Luxury Motors had catered to elite clients before, but this was different. This was the client. A man whose influence stretched from Earth to orbit. A transaction with Elon Musk could elevate the dealership's reputation overnight, perhaps opening doors Richard had long hoped to reach. The possibilities unfolded rapidly in his mind. A full fleet sale, perhaps. Custom orders for SpaceX or Tesla executives. Doors to new partnerships. The showroom staff would have to be perfectly aligned for tomorrow's visit. Within minutes, an emergency staff meeting was scheduled. The sales team gathered promptly in the glass conference room overlooking the showroom floor. The morning sunlight gleamed across the polished vehicles below as Richard addressed his staff, barely able to contain his excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very important private client visiting tomorrow morning. Mr. Elon Musk himself will be touring the showroom before opening hours." A murmur swept through the room. Even the most seasoned salespeople shifted in their chairs, sensing the weight of what this could mean for all of them. Blake Thompson allowed himself a quiet smile. Now this was the kind of client he was born to handle. High net worth individuals, accustomed to privilege, expecting the very best. His mind immediately began rehearsing his pitch, his posture straightening instinctively. It was the kind of opportunity that could secure year-end bonuses, or even promotions. The tension from yesterday's incident with the older woman had already faded from his mind, buried beneath the excitement of what now lay ahead. "We will operate at full discretion," Richard continued. "No leaks, no unnecessary questions. He has requested a quiet, tailored experience. That means everyone is to remain professional, focused, and respectful at all times. Blake, you'll take the lead. You've handled our high-tier clients before." Blake nodded, hiding the pride swelling beneath his controlled expression. "Absolutely, sir." Richard paused briefly, his eyes scanning the team. "And remember, this could be the beginning of a very long relationship with one of the most influential men on the planet. We don't get second chances with clients like this." As the team dispersed to begin preparations, Blake remained behind for a moment, his thoughts already racing. Elon Musk. Monarch Motors was about to enter a different league entirely. He imagined himself guiding Mr. Musk across the showroom, discussing customizations, closing seven-figure deals with ease. Outside, the staff began polishing the vehicles to an impossible shine, adjusting lighting angles, and rehearsing their greetings. Every detail mattered. Yet none of them, not even Blake, suspected the thread that connected this upcoming meeting to the quiet woman they had dismissed so easily the day before. The pieces had been carefully arranged on the board, but only one player fully understood the game that was about to unfold. The air inside Monarch Luxury Motors hummed with nervous anticipation, completely unaware that tomorrow's meeting would be far more than a simple sales consultation. The morning air was crisp as the sun climbed over Los Angeles, casting a golden sheen across the glass facade of Monarch Luxury Motors. The showroom glistened under the meticulously angled lighting, every chrome detail and leather surface gleaming in perfection. The staff stood ready, dressed in tailored suits, their smiles rehearsed, their posture polished. This was the kind of morning every luxury dealership dreamed of, a moment when reputation could transform in an instant. Outside, the silence was broken by the deep, velvety purr of an engine unlike any that had visited Monarch before. Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. The staff shifted, instinctively recognizing the arrival even before the vehicle came fully into view. Slowly, as if savoring its own presence, the Rolls Royce Phantom glided into the private driveway. But not just any Phantom. This was a bespoke model, elongated, finished in a custom midnight blue that seemed to shift subtly between indigo and black beneath the morning sun. The hand-polished surface reflected the towering palms and gleaming dealership windows like a mirror. Its wheels rolled with silent authority, the spirit of ecstasy standing proud at the front, catching the light as it came to a flawless stop directly before the entrance. The chauffeur exited first, his movements deliberate, white gloves perfectly creased. His polished black shoes stepped onto the pavement with crisp precision. Walking to the rear passenger door, he paused momentarily, scanning the surroundings, then reached for the handle. The door swung open in a smooth arc. From within the cabin's plush interior, Elon Musk emerged. He stepped onto the marble entry with a quiet confidence that required no announcement. Dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit that whispered rather than shouted wealth, he adjusted the cuffs of his crisp white shirt, the sunlight catching the subtle sheen of his cufflinks. His posture was upright but unhurried, as if time itself moved around him rather than the other way. Behind his composed gaze lay a sharp calculation, observing every face in the dealership within moments of stepping inside. Blake Thompson was the first to break from the stunned staff, practically gliding across the showroom floor in an effort to intercept this once-in-a-career moment. His pulse quickened, adrenaline rushing as he forced his most polished smile into place. He extended his hand with practiced enthusiasm, eager to seize control of the encounter. "Mr. Musk, welcome to Monarch Luxury Motors. It's an absolute honor to have you with us today. I'm Blake Thompson, sales manager. We've been preparing for your visit." Elon accepted the handshake, firm but brief, offering only the faintest smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His gaze was steady, cool, assessing. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. Thank you for accommodating this appointment." "Of course," Blake continued, practically glowing under the weight of what he assumed was admiration. "We have several models prepared for your private viewing today. If I may, I'd be delighted to begin with." Elon's voice cut through smoothly, calm but unmistakably final. "Actually, before we begin, there's something I'd like to address." Blake hesitated, the shift in tone barely perceptible but enough to stall him mid-pitch. "Of course, Mr. Musk. Anything you require." Elon's eyes flicked briefly across the polished showroom, pausing for a moment on each of the silent staff members who had gathered just far enough away to pretend they weren't listening. Daniel stood among them, his expression tense, lips pressed tightly together. "Yesterday," Elon began, "my mother visited this dealership. She came here hoping to inquire about a vehicle. The Azure Supreme Coupe, if I'm not mistaken." The name of the car hit Blake like a quiet thunderclap. His throat tightened involuntarily. Elon continued, his voice steady, as though narrating a simple fact. "Unfortunately, she was dismissed. Repeatedly. Judged by her appearance. Denied even basic courtesy. She left here humiliated." Blake's breath grew shallow. His polished confidence wavered, replaced with a creeping sense of dread. I wasn't aware," he stammered. "There may have been some misunderstanding, of course. We welcome all clients here, Mr. Musk. You personally ensured she was redirected to your used car inventory," Elon corrected softly. "You personally decided she didn't belong here." Behind Blake, Richard Mason approached, his face pale. His usual boardroom charm had evaporated as soon as Elon had spoken his mother's involvement aloud. "Mr. Musk," Richard began, his voice cautious. "Please allow me to extend our deepest apologies if there was any offense caused. I was only made aware of your visit this morning. Had I known, but you were present," Elon said, his voice calm but sharpened just enough to pierce through any defense. "You watched her leave, and you allowed your staff to laugh behind her back." Richard's mouth opened, but no words followed. He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to Blake for support that wasn't coming. From across the room, Daniel stepped forward, his young voice steady but nervous. "If I may, Mr. Musk. I remember your mother. She was polite. She asked several times to see the Azure coupe. She was turned away. She wasn't treated fairly." The silence in the room thickened. Even the distant hum of the air conditioning seemed to fade as everyone waited for Elon's next words. "Thank you, Daniel," Elon said, nodding with genuine appreciation. "I value honesty, especially when it's inconvenient." Blake swallowed, trying desperately to salvage the moment. "Mr. Musk, I assure you, this was never our intention. We pride ourselves on serving clients with the utmost respect." If your mother had only identified herself, Elon's gaze hardened for the first time. So respect here is earned only after one reveals their wealth or connections. My mother doesn't walk around advertising who her son is. Nor should she need to. His words echoed across the polished marble, hanging heavy in the air. This visit today, Elon continued, was not to purchase a fleet of vehicles, as you may have assumed. It was to address this moment. To see how you conduct yourselves when you think no one important is watching. Blake's face had drained of color, his hands now lightly trembling at his sides. Richard stood frozen, his eyes wide, his carefully constructed world beginning to splinter. Elon allowed a pause, scanning the silent room, watching the discomfort settle deeply into every corner. My mother was not looking for special treatment yesterday. She was looking for basic decency. And that, gentlemen, is where you failed. He turned slightly, as if preparing to walk deeper into the showroom, but then paused, his voice lowering just enough to carry a sharper edge. "Now, shall we proceed?" The stillness inside Monarch Luxury Motors was suffocating. The weight of Elon's words lingered heavily in the air, pressing down on every employee, every breath. The polished cars gleamed under the showroom lights, silent witnesses to the unfolding reckoning. Blake stood motionless, his polished exterior cracking beneath the growing spotlight of judgment. The charm he had so carefully curated for moments like this offered no shield now. His hands, once confidently gesturing during sales pitches, hung stiffly by his sides, fingers twitching unconsciously. Elon slowly turned back toward the center of the room, his gaze steady and precise as he addressed them all, but particularly Blake. "You see, Mr. Thompson, I evaluate people a little differently than you do. I judge character based on how you treat those who can offer you nothing. I judge employees by how they treat my mother, not by how they serve the wealthy." A murmur rippled through the room. Even among the staff who had remained silent, heads dipped, eyes averted. No one dared meet Elon's gaze. Daniel stood among them, his jaw clenched, his conscience wrestling with his nerves. Blake managed a dry swallow, his voice brittle when it finally emerged. "Mr. Musk, I truly regret what happened. Had I known who your mother was, I would have." "That," Elon interrupted sharply, "is precisely the problem. You would have treated her differently if you had known. And that is not respect. That is opportunism." Richard Mason shifted uncomfortably behind Blake, his normally confident face pale and damp. "Mr. Musk, please understand, Blake meant no harm. These situations can be delicate. Mistakes happen in high-pressure environments. Our intention has always been to serve every client with professionalism." Elon's voice remained calm, but each word landed with measured force. "Professionalism is not something reserved for those who look the part. Your team has demonstrated exactly the culture you've allowed to grow here, Mr. Mason." Daniel suddenly stepped forward, his voice firm though his chest rose and fell faster than before. "Mr. Musk, if I may. I was here when your mother visited. She was polite. She asked several times about the Azure coupe. She was dismissed. She was humiliated. And it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate." His words sliced through the room like a blade. The silence that followed was louder than any apology Blake or Richard could muster. Blake's face flushed red. His voice cracked as he scrambled for footing. I only followed protocol. We are trained to qualify buyers to protect the dealership's time and resources. We often receive visitors who cannot afford." Elon's gaze sharpened. You're trained to assume someone's financial worth based on their shoes, their age, the cut of their dress. My mother has faced that type of small-minded arrogance for decades. You saw a woman you didn't recognize and decided she was beneath your time. Blake's voice softened into desperation. I never intended to offend her. Intention is meaningless when the action causes harm, Elon replied, his tone colder now. You didn't need to offend her directly. You dismissed her existence. Richard took a cautious step forward, sensing the widening chasm. Mr. Musk, please, we take this matter very seriously. Perhaps we can find a way to make amends for this unfortunate incident. Elon's expression remained unreadable. You were expecting me to walk in today, sign a contract, purchase half your inventory, and reward your dealership despite yesterday's treatment of my mother. That's not how this will end. He let the silence breathe for a moment. All eyes remained fixed on him, hearts pounding in collective dread. I will purchase one car today. The Azure Coupe. The car my mother originally came to see. She will receive it as a gift, as she intended. Blake's shoulders sagged slightly at this partial reprieve. At least there would be some sale, some commission salvaged. However, Elon continued, his voice cooling again, there will be conditions. Mr. Thompson, you will participate in a community program organized by my mother's foundation. You will volunteer your time working with women who face daily discrimination not unlike what you displayed yesterday. You will listen to their stories, their struggles. You will learn what it feels like to be unseen. Blake froze, stunned by the unexpected terms. His lips parted but no words came. And Mr. Mason, Elon turned toward the dealership's owner, your staff will undergo mandatory training on unconscious bias and respectful service. You will hire external consultants to lead these sessions, and I expect full compliance. This is not a suggestion. Richard nodded quickly, desperate to stem the damage. Absolutely, Mr. Musk. We will implement whatever programs you see fit. Elon's voice softened just enough to let the gravity of the lesson settle. This dealership will not lose business today because of your offense. But you will not profit from ignorance unchecked. The real payment I seek is understanding. Blake stood there, sweat tracing a path along his temple, stripped of his former bravado. Daniel glanced sideways at him, his own breathing steadying as the confrontation drew to a close. Elon finally turned away, giving one last sweeping glance across the silent showroom. The staff remained still, their faces a mixture of shame, relief, and quiet reflection. My mother asked only for basic courtesy, Elon said as he walked toward the office to finalize the paperwork. And today, you all received a priceless education in what real wealth looks like. The quiet click of his footsteps echoed as he disappeared behind the frosted glass door, leaving the showroom suspended in the heavy stillness of a lesson painfully learned. The bright lights of Monarch luxury motors had faded into memory. In their place, Blake Thompson now found himself standing beneath the flickering fluorescent bulbs of a modest community center on the edge of the city. Gone were the polished marble floors, the gleaming supercars, and the easy rhythm of closing luxury deals. Here, the atmosphere was humbler, the conversations quieter, but the weight of what surrounded him pressed heavier than any high-stakes negotiation ever had. For the past week, Blake had reported here each morning, fulfilling the terms laid out by Elon Musk. At first, he approached it with the mechanical efficiency he applied to everything. He showed up on time. He smiled politely. He listened to the orientation speeches, shook hands with the coordinators, and assisted where he was assigned. But something shifted almost immediately. The stories. The faces. The reality he had never cared to see before. Each day brought new women through the doors. Older women. Some widowed. Some divorced after long marriages that left them with little. Others had worked their entire lives only to find themselves pushed aside by systems that offered no second chances. They were women who had once raised families, built careers, cared for loved ones. Now they navigated a world that barely noticed them. Blake helped set up tables for financial counseling sessions, carried boxes of donated clothing, and distributed food packages. He sat in on workshops where volunteers coached these women on how to navigate confusing paperwork for medical assistance or housing. And as the hours passed, a quiet discomfort grew inside him, gnawing away at the certainty he had always wrapped himself in. They weren't angry or bitter. Most carried themselves with dignity, offering warm smiles and polite thank yous for even the smallest gestures. But behind their eyes, Blake saw it. The exhaustion of being overlooked. The daily erosion of self-worth that came from being treated as invisible. The moment that struck him hardest came on the 5th day. He was helping a frail woman, perhaps in her late 70s, seated at a folding table, her thin hands shaking slightly as she clutched a worn handbag. She was speaking softly to a volunteer loan officer, her voice cracking as she explained her situation. "I only need a little help," she whispered. "My husband's medication is expensive. His heart condition. The insurance doesn't cover everything. I've never missed a payment before. I just need to borrow enough to carry us through the next 2 months." The loan officer, polite but firm, reviewed her paperwork. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Adler, but based on your current income and outstanding debt, you don't meet the minimum requirements for approval." The woman blinked rapidly, swallowing her disappointment as tears threatened to surface. "But my credit is good. I've always paid. I've never asked for help before." The officer softened his tone but remained unmoved. "I understand, but these are the guidelines." Blake stood frozen a few feet away, unable to look away. The air around him seemed heavier, pressing into his chest. He heard his own voice in his mind, sharp and dismissive. The same voice that had told Maye Musk, "Perhaps these models are more appropriate for your budget." If it had not been Maye Musk that day, if it had been this woman, or any of the women here, he would have dismissed them just as easily. He had dismissed them, over and over, in different faces and forms. He saw it now, laid bare before him. As the woman gathered her papers and quietly thanked the counselor for his time, Blake felt a knot tighten in his throat. His usual armor of smooth professionalism offered no protection here. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, Maye Musk arrived at the center for her weekly review of the Foundation's programs. She spotted Blake stacking supply boxes near the entrance and approached him quietly. He didn't see her at first, too lost in his own swirling thoughts. When he finally noticed, he straightened awkwardly, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Mrs. Musk. Good evening." Maye offered a kind smile, her voice gentle. "You've been here every day this week." He nodded, his voice softer than usual. "Yes. And I'll continue coming as long as needed." She studied him for a moment, reading the shift in his eyes, the weight behind his words. "You're starting to see," she said softly. "To see what others often refuse to look at." Blake exhaled slowly, his shoulders slumping under the release. "I thought I understood people. I thought I was good at reading them. But I wasn't seeing anyone. Not really. Not beyond their clothes, their wallets, their appearance." May's expression remained warm, but her gaze was steady. "Most people don't. That's why we built this place. Not just to help, but to remind us all how quickly we forget what true worth looks like." Blake looked around the quiet room, now nearly empty, the faint echo of earlier conversations still hanging in the air. "If that woman yesterday had walked into my dealership instead of your showroom, I would have turned her away, too." "The hardest lessons," Maye said gently, "are often the ones that teach us who we've been. But they also give us the chance to choose who we'll become." Blake nodded, his voice a whisper. "I don't want to go back to who I was." Maye placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Then don't. Keep your eyes open. Keep listening. The world has more to teach you, if you're willing." As she walked away, leaving him alone under the flickering lights, Blake stood in the stillness, feeling the weight of transformation settle into his bones. For the first time in years, he was seeing the world with different eyes. And the view was humbling. The grand ballroom buzzed with quiet energy, its crystal chandeliers casting warm light across the polished marble floors. Tables draped in soft ivory linen filled the room, each centerpiece a delicate arrangement of white roses and soft blue orchids. Around the room, guests mingled with gentle conversation and genuine smiles, creating a hum of hope that hovered just beneath the surface. The annual benefit for the Musk Foundation had begun. Blake Thompson stood near the entrance, dressed not in the sharp-tailored suits of his former life, but in the simple navy uniform of the event's volunteer staff. A silver name badge sat neatly on his chest. His movements were steady, his posture relaxed, his eyes alert not for clients or commissions, but for anyone needing assistance. Beside him, Daniel adjusted a stack of informational brochures on the donation table. The young salesman flashed Blake a grin. "Big night, huh?" Blake nodded, smiling back. "It is. In more ways than one." The past months had changed him. The community center had become part of his daily rhythm, each visit peeling back another layer of ignorance he had once worn so easily. The faces that had once blurred together now carried stories, names, and lessons. Daniel, once a junior colleague he barely noticed, had grown into a trusted friend and unlikely mentor. As the evening progressed, Blake guided several guests to their tables, helped an elderly couple navigate the silent auction display, and retrieved extra chairs for a group of donors. He moved with quiet purpose, each small task carrying a weight he no longer dismissed. Then, from across the room, a familiar presence entered. Elon Musk stepped into the ballroom with the same unhurried confidence he carried everywhere. Conversations softened as heads subtly turned. Though his fame brought attention, Elon's eyes immediately scanned the room not for admirers, but for one person. Blake straightened as Elon approached, his pulse quickening for reasons far different than the first time they had met. "Good evening, Mr. Musk," Blake greeted him softly. "Welcome." Elon nodded, his expression calm but watchful. "Blake, you've been busy." "Yes, sir," Blake answered, "and grateful for the chance." Elon glanced around the room, observing the joyful energy, the quiet dignity of those who had come to support the cause. His voice lowered slightly. "My mother tells me you've become quite dedicated to the program." Blake exhaled, his eyes reflecting something closer to humility than pride. "I have. The truth is, I thought I was good at reading people, Mr. Musk. For years, I believed I could size up anyone who walked into my showroom. But I've realized something." He paused, steadying his voice. "The only thing I was really good at was being wrong." Elon studied him for a moment, the faintest trace of a smile touching his lips. "Awareness is a difficult currency, Blake. Few people are willing to pay for it." Blake's voice dropped, genuine and clear. "I don't ever want to forget these faces, these lessons. They've changed how I see everything." Elon nodded once, thoughtfully. "Then perhaps you're ready for something else." Blake's brow furrowed slightly, uncertain. "You remember that corporate fleet I mentioned during our first conversation?" Elon continued. "SpaceX is still evaluating vendors. It requires someone who understands people, who listens first." Blake's breath caught. He hadn't dared hope. "You're offering me the account?" "I'm offering you the opportunity," Elon clarified. "But this time, let humility guide you. Build relationships, not assumptions." Blake's voice cracked as he answered. "I would be honored, sir. And I promise, I'll learn it the right way." Elon extended his hand, and Blake took it firmly, this handshake carrying none of the false polish of their first encounter. Across the ballroom, Maye Musk watched quietly, her eyes warm, her smile soft. She had seen the transformation not just in Blake, but in the many others who now filled the room. The music swelled gently as the evening continued, laughter mixing with heartfelt conversation. In that room filled with resilience, generosity, and second chances, Blake Thompson stood among them not as a salesman, not as a man chasing commissions, but as someone finally learning to see. For the first time, he understood what true wealth really meant. And this time, he was ready to carry it forward.